Okay, we are going to read this passage, which has a typo here, so I'm going to change that. It's supposed to be crow. We're going to read this passage, and then we are going to annotate it. So to annotate means that you are going to add notes or markings in order to better understand something and to be able to explain it later. So first we're going to read the story. The Quite Ordinary Crow. Just a few days ago, a quite ordinary crow found some brightly colored feathers lying in a field. I shall wear these feathers and be the finest crow there is, he said to himself. The crow sewed the brightly colored feathers to his tail. I am certainly the grandest crow there ever was, he said as he prepared to show off his new look. He found a flock of crows at one end of the field, and he proudly showed off in front of them. The crows then felt rejected because they did not have brightly colored feathers. The crow tried to join a flock of peacocks at the opposite end of the field. When the peacocks discovered him, they began to peck at his feathers with their beaks. Soon the crow was without his colorful feathers. The crow returned to the other crows, but they rejected him. They still felt hurt from being rejected. Okay, now we're going to annotate. Normally, you would annotate along on your piece of paper, but since you're at home and don't have this printed off, you're just going to watch and listen. First, who is this text about? This text is about the crow, so I'm going to underline a quite ordinary crow, and I'm going to write who above it. This is telling me who it's about. He is my character because it answers the question, who? Next, when does this story take place? We're asking a different question, so I'm going to change my color a little bit. When does the story take place? Just a few days ago. So I'm going to underline that and write when. Okay, where does the story take place? Once again, we have a different question, so I'm going to change my color. Where does the story take place? It takes place in a field. So this is my where. Where does it take place? It takes place in a field. What does the crow find in the first sentence? So now we're on to what. What was my plot? What did he do? He found some brightly colored feathers. So this is my what. What does the crow do with the feathers? So let's see. I shall wear these feathers and be the finest crow there is, he said to himself. The crow sewed the brightly colored feathers to his tail. So what did he do? He sewed them to his tail. This is still what, so I'm still using pink. What? What does the crow do after the feathers are sewn on his tail? So after that, I'm certainly the grandest crow there ever was. Is he prepared to show off his new look? So he's thinking about this, but he doesn't actually do that yet. He found a flock of crows at one end of the field, and he proudly showed off in front of them. Right, so this is also what? What happens to the other crows? The other crows felt rejected. So they don't feel accepted. They're not happy, right? So they felt rejected. This is still what? What does the crow do after he shows off in front of the crows? So he shows off, they reject him, they say no, or sorry, they felt rejected, so they're sad. So he tries to join a flock of peacocks next. This is still what? What do the peacocks do? The peacocks began to peck at his feathers, right? So they're taking off his feathers. Bye-bye. What does the crow do when he is without his feathers? He returned. The crow returned to the other crows. This is still what? How does the story end? They rejected him. So we're on our last question. They rejected him. This is the ending. How? Why did they reject him? This one I'm actually going to keep the same color because it's still talking about the ending, even though it's a different question. Actually, no, never mind. Why? So this is why they still felt hurt from being rejected. Okay. Look at all of the groups of words that are marked with what. Of all of these groups, which one is the most exciting? So when does something like really big happen? That is going to be right here. We're going to put a star. They began to peck at his feathers, right? This is when something happens and it is different from what we were expecting, or it's very important. This is the climax. Okay, now you're going to go ahead and answer some questions about this section.